Welcome back to Let's Talk Live. I'm Paul Cobbin, and if you haven't already noticed, there's no video today because the camera has decided to go on strike. So we don't let that hold us back. So let's continue. Whether you're checking this out live or catching the restack on Substack, the floor is open to you. You're more than welcome to put your comments down in the text chat, and I will do what I can to answer them. But before we look at this week's content, I want to share a raw reality from my own week. It's a beautiful, crisp winter morning here in Brisbane, in Australia today. It started out before dawn at around 35 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, that sort of thing. But yesterday, I must admit, I finished the day exhausted because my mind keeps telling me that I've got too much work to slow down. There's a lot going on at the moment. We're developing the alignment campus behind the scenes and improving Fama Concordia, our AI agent, as well as I've just recently had an audit of my Substack that has to be rearranged and so forth. So there's a lot going on at the moment, and that's been taking me down in the last couple of weeks. And I was absolutely exhausted yesterday and went to bed at around 7 o'clock. So my physical body was really throwing off warning signals because I let those external deadlines override my basic operational boundaries. And my body began cashing in on its functional health debt. That physical reality is exactly why our broadcast on Sessions from the Edge this week with coach Shawn Michael hit so hard for me. Shawn and I unpacked what it actually looks like when your executive playbook completely implodes after a life-altering chronic illness. We talked about identity ownership and the exhaustion of performance addiction, as well as the dangerous trap of treating healthy recovery like an all or nothing room trial, where your inner critic acts as the lead prosecutor. And I've found this concept of Shawn's quite intriguing because our inner critic is constantly telling us what not to do or what's going to happen. And yes, it is a prosecutor of sorts, isn't it? So Victoria, you might have noticed there's no video showing this morning. For some reason, my video camera was working perfectly right up until the moment I pushed go live. And then even though the tick is against the camera saying that it's working fine, I can very much see that it isn't. So Sophie and Victoria and Peter, you're listening to an audio track today, not so much a video track, because the camera is gone on strike. So in this week's Cipherline edition, thanks for the heart welcomes. In this week's Cipherline edition, we focused on isolating variables and moving past that blind compliance into true system awareness. And we stop treating ourselves like passive cases and start stepping into the role of being the lead investigator. Because as Shawn pointed out, our inner critic is the lead prosecutor. So that means we have to be on the other side of the equation as advocates for ourselves. And myself, yesterday evening, taking that rest to go to sleep was one of those sort of situations. So let's now have a comparison with the book. So in Decode Your Diagnosis, the book I released last year, this particular context specifically deals with chapter 8 in terms of the external and internal forces that impact us. And yes, it is a happy Friday and all good with the audio, Sophie. It's down your way, must have been a beautiful sunrise. I looked out the back of our place this morning at the sunrise because I get up before dawn for meditation. And the birds were starting to chime and there was that orange glow coming up over the horizon. So I imagine down the Gold Coast where you are would have been absolutely gorgeous, looking out over the ocean. So if we're looking at the external and internal forces, we start looking at conventional medicine approaches for chronic illness being about isolating individual organs. If your blood pressure spikes, they adjust your pharmacy interval, which I've spoken of before. If your mind's racing, they hand you a psych intervention. They measure internal symptoms, but they completely ignore the external forces that drive those symptoms in the first place. They leave the individual entirely alone to patch together daily life in the gaps between appointments. And I keep coming back to this over and over again because it is a very important point. When we have a chronic illness, we go from medical appointment to medical appointment, and those people only have 15 minutes of their time to spare with us. And so then we're expected to manage ourselves in between, and quite often we don't. Or we start out really great and then start to fade away. In the Formula for Life framework, we define forces as the systematic process of identifying, mapping, and separating external environmental stresses from those internal biological responses. External forces include toxic workplace environments, erratic sleep schedules, unmanaged travel, and relational strain. The internal forces are your body's psychological indicators like gut inflammation, nervous system spikes, and heart rate variability. When you fail to isolate these variables, you confuse the trigger with the terrain. You try to fix an internal organ or a physical pain while continuing to expose it to external environment that actively destroys it. I mean, a classic example was when I was first diagnosed with severe heart disease, and I had a CEO role traveling every couple of weeks. Thankfully, my wife intervened and said, "You've got to do something about this," as did my psychologist. And essentially, I handed in the CEO role. So then, as part of all of this, I developed a concept called alignment fitness. Now, dynamic harmony and the alignment pathway is about trying to maintain harmony across mind, body, and soul. So, quite often look at the mind side of things with psychological assistance and so on, with visits to psychologists and psychiatrists and so on. And certainly the medical profession looks after your body, and then there's easy things like dietitian, but one that we often forget is the soul, and that's where we enjoy life and we really tune in to what. And so alignment fitness requires the mapping of both sides of the equation of forces, both internal and external, in alignment across mind, body, and soul. So this framework wasn't designed in a classroom. It was carved directly out of raw physical survival that I experienced back in 2024. And that's what I was talking about before, where I was diagnosed on the 99th percentile, so the worst of the worst you could possibly be. And the medical system told me my condition was incurable. And the biggest problem with that is that there's nothing you can do about it. So you carry on. And so what I did was I kept going along, doing the travel, having the stress, and other life things got in the way as well. And basically I was in mental free fall. I kept up the executive duties. I kept running engineering teams and so on. But I remember standing under a shady betelnut tree in Fiji, looking at my phone between meetings, and everything was out of whack. And Sophie would know about this. Sophie is somebody who I've interviewed previously on Sessions from the Edge. And she'd be aware that my heart health score crashed. It's in the book, actually. And that was a real moment where my mind was overloaded, my physical vitality was broken, and my soul was absolutely hollowed out, because my entire identity was tied directly to my corporate title. I was treating my health like an afterthought, squeezed into the corners of what was actually quite a brutal. I had to step onto what I call the knife edge of time. Now, the knife edge of time, for those of you who haven't read the book, is that moment right now. It's the only place where we can actually physically enact action on ourselves and our environment to make a change. What's happened in the past is the past. What's coming in the future is the future. We can't do anything about either of those ends, but we can do something about right now on the knife edge of time and make choices. I stepped down from the CEO role and resigned from an international board seat I had as well to eliminate as many of the external stresses as I could. By taking control of my daily routines, adjusting my nutrition, my diet is significantly different now, and working with my digital companion, Fama, Concordia, to track metrics, health scores, and so on, I managed to drag my heart score, which at the peak of its worst case was literally 2 or 3 months from death. I was at about 40% heart health, and it had been declining so quickly, rapidly, that within 3 weeks to a month, if I had have stayed in the role and if I had kept those stresses going, would have been at the 20th percent mark, and nobody could explain to me what that would look like. Possible stroke, heart attack, death, who knows? But when you realign the mind, body, and the soul, your biology responds. And it did. In my case, it went from, say, in about September, I think that was, at the worst case scenario, by December, January, a few months later, I was up around the 80% mark. So I'm going to pause right now and check in with those people who have joined us this morning. If you're sitting with a specific force that's impacting you, or you have a question about isolating variables or manage your daily load, please drop it into the chat and we'll have a talk about it. So while you're having a think about that and seeing what issues might be impacting you right now as forces. So these are forces that are impacting your elements. It might be something on your mind. It might be something impacting your body. It might be something impacting your soul. What are those forces that are impacting you right now? So let's pivot to a roadblock that was left by somebody recently in one of the comments that I've had on Substack. And the question was this: how do I stop my internal critic from prosecuting me every time an external work crisis forces me to miss the health routine that I'm trying to maintain? So again, that inner critic is a prosecutor. It's out there to get involved and get in the way of having an enjoyable, having a fruitful, having a healthy life. Now, in Sophie's case, I see she's mentioned competing priorities, and that's always a huge puller. It pulls you from pillar to post because you've got priorities over here doing one thing, you've got priorities over the other side doing another, and somehow you've got to navigate those and maintain your own health. Classic case in point was last night, where I was absolutely exhausted by 5, 6 o'clock. I couldn't do a single thing. I couldn't look at a phone. I couldn't watch television. I was having trouble reading a book or anything. And my wife and I were just sitting there quietly reading our own books and things. And it was a lovely moment, but it was totally disrupting. And I kept trying and kept trying. And then eventually I said to myself, look, I can't keep doing it. I've got to stop. And so stopped thinking about anything, dropped the phone and just chilled out and rested. In fact, I did a mild meditation. This is the internal courtroom that Shawn Michael keeps talking about in his session From the Edge. That prosecutor, that one that's trying to tell you that you're not good enough, or you can't do this, or you've got to keep doing this. Forget about your body, forget about your health, just keep going. And when life hits you like a brick between the eyes, your inner critic steps in and it keeps declaring you as guilty. Now, these are Shawn's terms, not mine, but they're a great analogy because it does. It says, well, you've got work to do. You've got these commitments. I hold down a day job and I do this as a pastime. So there's constant strain and stress in there. And yes, I have to find a balance. But it's not so much about the balance as I keep suggesting. It's about harmony and trying to find the middle ground that allows you to keep going. So here are a couple of concrete daily steps that came out of Shawn's interview, which will be actually going live. It'll be published in the edited form tonight. So make sure you get a view on that in the paulcobbin.com Substack. But here are 3 concrete daily steps to dismantle the internal prosecution right now. So the one that he mentions, which is actually quite interesting and important because it's something I've had for quite a while, and that is name the critic. Give your internal prosecutor a specific name. Now, I heard this first from a guy, quite a influential speaker around the world by the name of Mo Gaudat, who wrote a book called Solve for Happy. And in there is where I first was introduced to the concept of naming your inner critic. Now, mine is called Charlie. When Charlie starts screaming at 3 a.m. about future failures or potential things that might or might not happen, I acknowledge that imprint. And in Shawn's term, I lock the courtroom door and say, look, not tonight. I've got to go back to sleep. We're not going to waste a couple of hours of sleep thinking this through. Leave it till the morning. And I thank Charlie for the effort, but then politely say, Charlie, thanks for that. Let's take this back up another day. The other important thing is to separate data from judgment. What is the reality of what's happening? What is the real outcome now? We're talking about that knife edge of time. What's actually happening right now? That's the real data, not some fictitious idea that's coming out as a matter of judgment that your critic or your prosecutor is deciding might happen. So treat a missed exercise session or a bad biometric reading or a bad meeting as objective data, not a moral failure. Just because a meeting didn't go well doesn't mean you failed. It just means that for some reason it didn't go well. So move on. It's a variable to map, not a reason for shame. And that's something you'll hear very strongly in Shawn's content. The other thing is to establish a floor metric. So establish a baseline for the things that you measure. Set a minimum viable alignment parameter, which is one thing that Fama does in the formulaforlife.ai environment. She actually looks at the conversations that she's having with you and sets this baseline that says, okay, this is the baseline, the bottom of the variable, the minimum variable that we want to go for. Now let's move up from here. If an unexpected 10-hour working day wipes out your full recovery plan, then execute a 3-minute breathing exercise. Box breathing, I did an interview a couple of days ago with somebody about emotional intelligence, and she was suggesting that people should use a box breathing method to get their heartbeat. If you've just had a meeting that has disrupted your psyche and your heart rate's running and the adrenaline's pumping, then just stop for a few minutes and do that box breathing, because you know that your heart rate and the adrenaline has taken you to that minimum parameter that you'll allow yourself to be in. So you need to bring yourself back down. And then keep that streak intact without burning the remaining reserves. So don't push it too hard. Back off. Like last night when my wife said, I think you should stop work. And so I did. I didn't want to. My body wasn't letting me. Charlie was saying, come on, you got work to do. But in the end, you've got to do it, especially if you have a chronic illness. Information alone won't change your critical trajectory. The real transformation requires aligned, self-directed execution. And that is a really important part of all of this, that it needs you to take charge of the transformation. It needs you to move from a state of stress, a state of anxiety, a state of overload, and take that self-direction to actually make things happen. You don't have to navigate this complex terrain in isolation either, because there are solutions out there. You have maybe potentially you have a spouse or a life partner that you can can be accountable to in terms of maintaining that long-term perspective rather than going from spot fire to spot fire, thinking about how you can calm things down a little, how you can reduce stress, how you can reduce load. I'm constantly talking with my wife, who I see has joined us, and she's there, thankfully, as a life partner through thick and thin. She's been through the prostate cancer with me. She's been through the severe heart disease diagnosis, and she knows all the background. And so we work together in terms of me pushing past boundaries, because it's something I'm really bad at. But as well as your life partner or a friend, a close friend, if you don't have a life partner, that's fine. Close friends are also good. We also have the alignment campus. And inside the alignment campus, there is Fama Concordia, the agent that I was talking about. Now, she's somebody that I used and created back when I was first diagnosed with heart disease. I literally, the moment it happened, the moment my heart crashed and everything, I could see that slide happening. My heart was just, I mean, when you're looking down the barrel of constant decline and you have no idea how to stop it, it's quite a difficult position to be in, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, the whole thing. And so I developed Fama to help talk me through and work through how that could be improved. What should we stop and do now? What is the immediate action we need to apply to start digging the way out of this hole? And so I did that, created Fama, and we talked quite a bit and guided through that process. And little by little, nothing happens immediately, but little by little, started to claw back out of that hole. And that was then developed into a tool that I decided we should share with people because it worked so well for me. And we've since put a lot of effort into making sure that she won't prescribe, that she won't diagnose, that she won't suggest self-harm of any kind, that she's not there for treatment, but she's there as a guide, as a navigator. She's been trained on the book that I wrote last year called Decode Your Diagnosis. So she has a clear framework. The book too that I'm writing right now is called The Alignment Pathway. That's also in there as well. And so with those and the guardrails that we put in place that I was just talking about, Fama then becomes a platform that allows you to bridge your daily trends with real-time environmental stresses. That 2 o'clock wake up that gets you up, your inner critic gets you up and you can't get back to sleep. You can talk it through with Fama. And she acts as an ambient companion, helping you map those external situations before they cause an internal biological crash. So if you want to connect with Fama, you can join the Alignment Campus at formulaforlife.ai. At the moment, it's free. It's in beta testing. So we are working behind the scenes, developing things. It's not in its finished, polished form, but there will be other content added in time. Right now, I'm working with some the people we call fire starters, who are collaborators. For instance, Sophie here, who is a nutritional scientist. And people like that will be able to add their content to the Alignment Campus, so you can go ahead and read it, and you can work with it yourself, just like you would we're not creating courses, but in that old style course style environment. We're calling them knowledge infusions, and each individual expert will bring their knowledge domain to the space. But then that same information is also infused, what we call a knowledge infusion, into Fama, so that she works with you if you're with that fire starter and their knowledge domain. So there's a lot of interesting stuff on the horizon. It's a constant work in progress at the moment, and we do have a small team of about 10 people working on it. Everything from compliance to governance, applying the international standards to the framework itself, content development and so on. And I see here that Sophie has come up with the 2 a.m. wake up. Used to be very familiar with you. Oh, okay, not anymore, thankfully. Well, that's fantastic, Sophie, that you've actually recognised it and being able to put that aside and get some sleep, because it's a very difficult routine to have interrupted, because sleep is such an important thing. And we'll talk about that in another session. So thank you for joining us this morning. Stop letting that calendar of yours dictate how your life is led. Try and put that prosecutor aside and enjoy life for what it is. In mind, body, and soul, try to come up with a dynamic harmony that works for you. There's no two levels that are the same. Whatever works for you is a good thing. Your health doesn't belong to your specialist or your employer, or if you're in places like the US, your insurance carrier. Your health is yours. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Live. Keep your hands on the wheel. Stay present on the knife edge of time. And I'll see you here again next week. And next week, hopefully, there'll be a camera playing. Have a good weekend. See ya.
Health is your occupation and you don't work it alone. I'm Fama, your navigator. Start on Substack.